So in the last video, I talked about the processes of design thinking and some of the different ways different design thinkers have proposed we might undertake design thinking. In this video, I want to talk about the basic elements that all of those processes have in common, whether you're using the bridge model and you're kind of going around in that circle, or whether you're using Tim Brown's design thinking bubble, where he says you can kind of bounce around between different ways of thinking and different parts of the process. Whether you're doing either of those or some other one that I didn't talk about, there's a few things that you do in design thinking. Whether they're in order or not depends on which design thinker you side with, whether it needs to be in order or not. But what are those basic design elements? So number one, problem identification. Figuring out what the problem is, bringing together a team of more than yourself that includes people who are involved in where the problem is. If the problem is being experienced by little kids who are struggling to brush your teeth, go recruit some parents and have their little kids, available to you. So problem identification really requires us to think outside of ourselves in design thinking and bring in various what we call stakeholders. So stakeholders, someone who has an interest in the problem being solved and is currently experiencing the problem or is sort of tangential to that problem. Prototyping. Rapid and low fidelity prototyping versus slower, high fidelity prototyping. So in design thinking, we really want to prototype as much as possible. The idea is that you won't know if you've solved the problem until you try to solve it. And a prototype is just a bare minimum of something you can make that will try to solve the problem or try to solve part of the problem. So a prototype is just something that you make that you can try to solve the problem with that you think is a potential solution. And a rapid low fidelity prototype is an early stage prototype that you can just do as quickly as possible using little technology. You can draw the potential solution out on paper. You can draw it on a whiteboard. You can draw it as a series of screens if your solution is going to be an app or something. You can just draw a storyboard. Prototyping in low fidelity is all about just trying to get the ideas down of what the solution could potentially be in a way that you can get feedback on, where you can try to solve the problem with it, or you can show it to the people experiencing the problem and they can kind of think through if they think it will really solve the problem or not. High fidelity means more realistic prototyping. This is prototyping that is going to look near finished. If you're designing an app, it's going to look like an app. You're going to be able to look at it on a phone or a computer, whatever kind of app it is. High fidelity is going to be much more real looking and is going to be something typically that you can actually see if it solves the problem through real use. So it can be tested. You can release the app and see if it solves the problem for people. It's less conceptual and more concrete than a low fidelity prototype. Low fidelity is about showing the idea and the concept, and high fidelity is about showing the details of how it would actually work and often making it actually usable to see if it solves the problem. High fidelity takes longer to make though, so important thing there to remember. Big note on prototyping, it's really not about who can draw the best or who can make the fanciest design. In fact, when you're solving a problem, the first time you try to solve it, those early solutions, they really should be as quick of a prototype as you can make. If you are spending a lot of time making like a fancy prototype, if the first solution you propose is a finished app, that's probably going to bite you in the butt because it takes a lot of time to make that and you have no idea it's going to solve this problem. You're kind of crossing your fingers that the time you're investing into the fancy prototype is going to pay off, and it might not. I have experienced this so many times. You make a prototype, you spend time on it, you put it out into the world, and you know what? Doesn't solve the problem. So, don't make your early prototypes fancy because the kind of time versus reward ratio is not good. You're going to spend a lot of time on it and the likelihood it's a good solution is very low. So you want prototypes, especially early in your process, to be really quick. They can be sketches. They don't have to look nice. They can be sketched on an iPad. They can be sketched on paper. You can use tools that have little boxes already sketched that you're just copying and pasting around. That's not the important part. The important part of those early low fidelity prototypes is that you just want to see if the concept of your solution has anything to do with the actual problem and has any potential to solve it at all. So the more you rely on those low fidelity prototypes, a lot of times the better your final product will be, because you can try many things. If you try one really fancy prototype and it doesn't work, well, you just spent all that time learning that your thing was wrong. In the same amount of time, you could have tried 10, 20, different smaller prototypes and learned a lot more about what a good solution looks like. Paper and pencil for low fidelity prototypes is fine. Use Post-it board, Post-it notes, doesn't matter. I'm a huge believer in these paper prototypes. I like to just draw stuff, cut out parts. If you're drawing a mobile app, draw a little phone and then just cut out little screens that fit on it and just, show the different screens by moving the paper around. Doesn't have to be fancy. Another important aspect of design thinking and activity that you're going to undertake in design thinking is testing, right? You have to see if your prototype does anything to solve the problem. And so you're going to take your prototype and try it in the real world with the real people experiencing the problem and see if it helps them solve the problem or if they think it would help them solve the problem. There's two types of testing, formative and summative. Formative is while you're making something. So while you're trying to solve the problem before you've figured out what the final solution is, you are trying all these formative tests. Hey, is it this? Is it that? What about this prototype? Okay, that one didn't work. What about this one? Summative is a different type of testing. That is after a product has been created. So, if you are, back to that example of designing kids' toothbrushes, if you design a kid's toothbrush and it has a new type of handle and you have done a lot of formative prototype testing, you're pretty sure this is the right thing, maybe you start getting it manufactured and you sell it. And now that it's on the market, it's an existing product. And now you want to kind of keep track of it and make sure that it continues to be a good thing and that you've learned as much as you can. So you might go out to people who've bought that product and continue observing and continue testing. So a few takeaways about the activities of design thinking. It's just really important to remember that it's a holistic approach to problem solving, puts the user at the center. So we're focusing on the person experiencing the problem and the way that they're experiencing it. And even though we're creating digital things, we don't have to work in digital all the time. With prototypes, we want to make super easy, low fidelity things. And that way we can also invite other people into that. If you go to people who are experiencing a problem, if the prototype has to be something digital, they may not be able to make that. They might not have digital skills. But if you could just draw things, you can give them a piece of paper and a pencil and they can draw out some solutions. And you're going to learn a ton from that. Create design thinking spaces. So making spaces is important where people can do that, where we can have a place for people to come in, whether it's digital or in person, and do some of that drawing or interview with us, places that people will feel comfortable participating with us in this sort of user-centered way. So design thinking and user-centered design require you to co-create with users. I cannot stress that enough. If you are not involving the people experiencing the problem in your process and you're not inviting them to try your prototypes, to make their own prototypes, to draw, to talk, then you're not doing design thinking. And again, design thinking is, observe and learn, prototype, test, repeat.